He woke up next to the chief's daughter. At dawn, 321 warriors waited for the wedding. At first, he thought he was still dreaming because nothing about this morning felt real. The smell of the forest, mixed with faint traces of smoke from the night before, filled his senses. His head throbbed slightly, a dull reminder of the events that had brought him here. But what made him freeze in shock was the realization of where he was and who was next to him. Layla, the daughter of the village chief, lay peacefully on the other side of the mat. Her hair, dark as the midnight sky, was spread around her shoulders, and the gentle morning light made her look like a figure from a storybook. Rajan's heart raced. He had never imagined waking up next to someone so important in his life, someone whose family commanded respect across the region, whose word was law, and whose presence alone could make people tremble with admiration. The events of the previous night were a blur. There had been music, dancing, and laughter. Rajan remembered arriving at the festival in the village, invited by a friend who assured him it would be a simple celebration. But simple had never meant anything when the chief's family was involved. The night had been filled with traditional songs, the clanging of drums, and the smell of roasting food that made everyone's mouth water. Rajan had joined the dance reluctantly at first, feeling awkward among the villagers who moved with practiced grace, their steps synchronized like a well-rehearsed performance. But soon the rhythm took over and he forgot his shyness, laughing freely as he spun around with others in the circle. Then there was Leela. He had noticed her watching him from across the crowd, a soft smile playing on her lips. She had always seemed untouchable to him from afar, graceful, intelligent, and strong in a way that commanded respect without asking for it. And yet, somehow, their eyes had met, and in that brief moment, something unspoken had passed between them. Rajan had brushed it off at first, thinking it was just the excitement of the night, a fleeting connection that meant nothing. But now, as he looked at her sleeping beside him, he realized that connection had been more than he had expected, or more than he had dared to imagine. Panic began to creep in. What had happened after the dance? He tried to piece it together, but his memory offered only fragments, laughter echoing in the hut, the sound of a soft voice speaking to him in a tone he could not remember clearly, and the warmth of someone close to him. He had been careful not to get involved in complicated situations, especially not with the chief's daughter. Any mistake could bring dishonor, not just to him, but to her as well. Rajan slowly shifted, careful not to wake her. Each movement felt like stepping on a wire stretched taut above a canyon. He could almost hear the imagined gasps of the villagers if they discovered him here. The thought made him sweat, despite the cool morning air. His mind raced with possible excuses, stories he could tell, or ways to slip away unnoticed. But at the same time, he couldn't ignore the faint feeling that this was more than a simple accident. Something about the night, the way fate had led him here, felt significant. He listened carefully, trying to hear any sound from outside the hut. The village was still waking up. Birds chirped lazily, and the distant murmur of villagers preparing for the day floated through the cracks in the wooden walls. Rajan knew that soon, the village would be bustling with activity. Everyone would be preparing for the grand wedding that was scheduled for that morning, an event that had drawn 321 warriors to the village, all ready to honor tradition and celebrate a union arranged by the chief. He swallowed hard, realizing that if anyone saw him here now, the situation could escalate beyond control. Rajan's thoughts wandered back to Leela. She stirred slightly, murmuring something in her sleep. For a moment, he was tempted to wake her, to explain himself, to apologize for the confusion. But he stopped himself. The last thing he wanted was to embarrass her or create a misunderstanding that could affect her standing in the village. Instead, he decided to stay quiet, to wait until she woke naturally, hoping that by then, he could find a way to leave discreetly. He looked around the hut. It was small, made of woven bamboo and thatched roof, decorated simply with mats and a few clay pots. The simplicity of the place was comforting in a strange way, a stark contrast to the chaos his thoughts were creating. Rajan took a deep breath, trying to calm his racing heart. He reminded himself that panic would only make things worse. He needed a plan, a way to navigate this morning without causing trouble, without offending anyone, and most importantly, without hurting Leela's reputation. Minutes passed, feeling like hours. Rajan replayed the night in his mind, searching for clues, trying to understand how he had ended up here. Each memory was hazy, like fragments of a dream slipping through his fingers. There was the festival, the dance, the laughter, and a moment when Leela had grabbed his hand, pulling him into a corner to speak privately. What had she said? He couldn't remember, and yet that moment seemed to have changed everything. As he sat there, he realized that running away now would not solve anything. The village was small and secrets were rarely kept. Someone would notice his absence, or worse, his presence, and rumors would spread like wildfire. He had to think carefully, act wisely, and consider every possibility. Rajan knew that honesty might be his only hope, but the timing had to be perfect. He couldn't just confess. He needed to understand what had truly happened first. Finally, Leela stirred fully, opening her eyes and blinking against the morning light. Rajan's heart skipped a beat. Her expression was calm, almost serene, as if she had anticipated this moment. She did not scream, nor did she seem angry. Instead, she looked at him with a mixture of curiosity and quiet amusement. Rajan swallowed hard, unsure whether to speak or remain silent. He decided on honesty. I don't know how this happened," he said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. I mean last night it's all a blur." Leela smiled faintly, shaking her head. "Rajan, sometimes things happen that are beyond control," she said softly. "The important thing is how we handle them now." Her words were simple, but they carried weight. Rajan realized that she was not just the chief's daughter. She was a person of wisdom and courage, someone who could guide him through this mess. For the first time since waking up, he felt a small sense of relief. Maybe this morning would not end in disaster. Maybe with care and honesty he could navigate the challenge ahead. Outside the hut, the village continued to awaken. The sounds of drums, voices, and the rustling of leaves reminded Rajan that the world was moving forward, with or without him. He knew that soon, the preparations for the wedding would be complete, and the 321 warriors would stand ready, awaiting the ceremony. The thought made him nervous, but he also realized that running or hiding would only make things worse. He had to face whatever came next with courage and respect. Rajan took a deep breath, standing slowly and carefully. He offered a small bow to Leela, a gesture of respect and apology. She returned it with a nod, signaling her understanding. Together, they would face the morning, navigating the delicate balance of tradition, honor, and personal choice. And as the first rays of sunlight filled the hut, Rajan felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders, but also a strange sense of hope. Somehow he believed that the events of this morning, however unexpected, could lead to something meaningful, something that would change both of their lives forever. As the sun rose higher, the village began to come alive. The soft morning light revealed the bustling activity that had been quietly stirring in the shadows, while Rajan and Leela confronted their own confusion. Smoke from cooking fires curled into the sky, children ran along the paths laughing, and merchants arranged their small stalls for the day. But the excitement in the air was different today. It was not just another morning in the village. Today was the day of the wedding, a ceremony that had been anticipated for months, and the entire community was preparing to honor it with meticulous care. Rajan stepped out of the small hut, trying to remain calm. The fresh air did little to ease his nerves. Every step toward the center of the village made him feel more exposed, as though the villagers' eyes were silently observing him, even if they were. He reminded himself to stay composed. He knew that any sudden or suspicious movement could spark rumors before anyone even spoke to him. He had already realized that appearances mattered as much as actions in a place like this. The village square was a spectacle. A large wooden platform had been constructed for the ceremony, decorated with colorful cloth and garlands of flowers. The scent of jasmine and marigold filled the air, mixing with the earthy aroma of the village soil. Women in bright, flowing dresses moved gracefully between the tables of food, arranging plates and serving dishes with care. Men carried baskets of fruit, trays of sweetmeats, and bundles of fresh flowers, while others polished ceremonial weapons that glinted in the sunlight. The warriors, 321 of them, stood in formation, a disciplined line of strength and authority, their eyes scanning the crowd with alert attention. Each one held a spear, a shield, or a bow, reminding everyone that this wedding was not just a celebration, but a ceremony of power and tradition. Rajan felt a shiver run down his spine. He counted the warriors silently, trying to memorize their positions. Their presence was imposing. They were not just guards, they were living symbols of the chief's authority, each one trained to defend the village and uphold its customs. Rajan knew that any misstep today could anger them. The thought made him feel small, almost invisible against their towering figures and disciplined stance. Yet, at the same time, he realized that his survival, and perhaps even his future, depended on understanding their ways and moving carefully. He glanced at Leela, who walked beside him, her steps confident and calm. Unlike him, she seemed entirely at ease with the situation. Her dark eyes swept across the village square, noting every detail with quiet precision. Rajan admired her composure. She had grown up in this village, trained by her father to handle every kind of challenge, and her calmness in the face of potential chaos was a reminder of the strength that came from experience. Rajan wished he could feel the same confidence, but for now, he clung to her guidance and tried to follow without drawing attention. The villagers were busy with their final preparations. Men carried large wooden beams, placing them carefully to support the ceremonial arch. Women adjusted the hanging decorations, their hands steady despite the early hour. Children darted between adults, delivering messages or carrying small offerings, giggling when they accidentally bumped into someone. Everyone was moving with purpose, and yet there was a rhythm to the chaos, a sense that despite the hurried actions, the community knew exactly what needed to be done. Rajan's attention was drawn to the food arrangements. Large platters of rice, lentils, and vegetables had been laid out on long tables, alongside smaller dishes of sweets and fruits. The aroma of fresh bread baking in the village ovens mingled with the scent of roasting meats. He realized how much effort had gone into preparing this day, how many people had worked tirelessly to ensure everything would be perfect. The wedding was not just a personal event, it was a reflection of the village itself, a moment where everyone's contributions would come together in harmony. As he walked further, Rajan overheard conversations among the villagers. Whispers passed quickly from one group to another, and although most were about routine preparations, some mentioned him. "Did you see him?" one woman asked quietly. "The outsider near the chief's daughter last night." Another shook her head. "I heard it was an accident, but still, unexpected." Rajan felt a pang of worry. He knew that word of his presence might spread faster than he could control, and even a small rumor could reach the chief before he was ready. He needed to stay cautious and think several steps ahead. Leela noticed his tension and leaned slightly toward him. "Do not worry," she whispered softly. "Everyone is focused on the wedding. They will not notice us unless we draw attention." Her words brought him a small measure of relief, but he knew she was right. Any sudden movements or an unexpected glance in the wrong direction could alert someone. He squared his shoulders, telling himself to move carefully, to blend into the crowd and observe rather than act recklessly. The warriors caught his attention again. They were tall, strong, and disciplined, forming precise lines along the main pathway leading to the ceremonial platform. Each warrior held a weapon with careful poise, yet their eyes flickered with curiosity as they occasionally scanned the crowd. Rajan tried to study them, to understand their movements, their expressions, and the rhythm of their vigilance. He realized that these warriors were not only protectors, but also the eyes and ears of the chief. They would notice everything, any sign of disrespect, any action that seemed suspicious. He had to prove, without saying a word, that he meant no harm. As the morning progressed, musicians began to arrive, carrying traditional drums and flutes. The soft, rhythmic sounds filled the air, blending with the chatter of villagers and the rustling of leaves in the trees. The music brought a sense of calm, a gentle reminder that today was not only about authority or discipline, but also about celebration. Rajan felt the tension in his chest ease slightly. The day was dangerous, yes, but it was also filled with life, with joy, and with the hope of something new. He turned to Leela, noticing her gaze focused on the warriors. She seemed to be assessing them, measuring their movements, predicting their reactions. They respect strength, yes, she said quietly, but they respect honesty more. If we show them we mean no harm, they will follow tradition without question. Rajan nodded, absorbing her words. He realized that this was not just a matter of survival. It was a lesson in understanding culture, in navigating honor and respect with care. The villagers continued their preparations. Some men carried water from the nearby river to fill ceremonial basins, while others set up mats and seating for elders and guests. Women carefully placed offerings on small wooden tables, arranging flowers and candles in patterns that symbolized blessings and prosperity. Children ran errands, fetching small items or delivering messages between adults, their laughter adding a lightness to the otherwise tense atmosphere. Rajan watched all of this with growing admiration. Every action seemed purposeful, every movement connected to a larger plan. He realized that the wedding was not just an event for the chief's daughter. It was a reflection of the entire community, a celebration of unity, tradition, and shared responsibility. The more he observed, the more he understood that his own role, though unplanned, was part of this intricate balance. Suddenly, a horn sounded from the village entrance. Rajan's heart jumped. The warriors snapped to attention, their disciplined posture unwavering. Villagers paused briefly, looking toward the sound. It was the signal that the ceremony was about to begin, the moment when all preparations would come together. Rajan swallowed hard. He knew that soon he would have to decide how to act, how to present himself, and how to navigate the challenges of the day. Leela turned to him, her expression calm but determined. "We must face this together," she said softly. "Trust in me and trust in the way of the village. Everything else will follow." Rajan nodded, feeling a surge of courage. He realized that he was not alone in this. He had an ally, someone who understood the traditions, the expectations, and the subtleties of the day. With her guidance, perhaps he could survive, and even thrive, through the morning ahead. As the first guests began to arrive, Rajan took his place beside Leela, stepping carefully onto the pathway lined with the 321 warriors. Their eyes followed him, measuring, judging, but not yet condemning. He held his head high, remembering her advice, honesty and respect. Every step he took was deliberate, every gesture measured, as he tried to blend into the rhythm of the village while maintaining his dignity. The music swelled, and the villagers began to sing softly, their voices lifting in harmony with the wind. Rajan felt a strange sense of belonging, despite the uncertainty that surrounded him. He realized that this day, which had begun with panic and confusion, might also be the day where new bonds were formed, where courage and honesty could lead to acceptance. And as the sun climbed higher into the sky, casting its warm light on the village, Rajan prepared himself for whatever challenges awaited him next. knowing that he had to remain steady, patient, and respectful in the face of scrutiny. The village square had become a hive of activity. The final preparations for the wedding were in place, and every villager seemed to be moving with purpose. Yet, amidst the bustle, Rajan felt the weight of a different kind of tension pressing upon him. The 321 warriors who had been standing in disciplined formation earlier now watched him with more intensity, their eyes sharp, scanning for any sign of disrespect or dishonesty. Rajan could feel their judgment, even without a word being spoken. He knew that one wrong glance or hesitant step could change everything. He glanced at Leela. She walked with the calm confidence of someone who had been raised to face such situations. Her father, the chief, had taught her to navigate moments like this with intelligence, respect, and courage. Rajan felt reassured by her composure, but he also knew that she could not protect him entirely. The chief's gaze was unforgiving, and his decisions were final. Rajan's fate rested on how he handled this confrontation. Suddenly, a hush fell over the crowd. The chief had arrived. His presence was commanding, his tall frame accentuated by traditional garments and ceremonial ornaments. The villagers instinctively fell silent as he stepped forward, flanked by the elders and the most senior warriors. Rajan's heart pounded. This was the moment he had feared. The chief would look into his eyes, search his soul, and decide whether he was worthy or whether he had brought shame. The chief stopped a few steps in front of Rajan, his piercing eyes locking onto the young man. There was no anger in his expression yet, only curiosity and a demand for honesty. Rajan bowed deeply, trying to show respect without appearing weak. He remembered the lessons Leela had whispered to him earlier. Honesty, courage, and respect were valued above all else. Taking a deep breath, he prepared to speak, knowing that every word mattered. "Rajan," the chief said, his voice steady and deep, carrying across the silent square. "It has come to my attention that you were with my daughter last night. Explain yourself." Rajan's throat went dry. He had imagined this moment countless times, but now that it was here, it felt overwhelming. He struggled for a moment to find words that were both truthful and respectful. "Chief," he began, his voice quiet but firm, I do not know how it happened. We were at the festival and I was not thinking clearly. I respect your family and I respect you. I would never intentionally bring dishonor to anyone." The chief's eyes narrowed slightly, studying Rajan carefully. The warriors shifted in their positions, their spears catching the sunlight, their expressions unreadable. Rajan could feel their silent scrutiny, the unspoken challenge in their gaze. He knew he could not rely solely on words. His actions, his demeanor, and the sincerity in his eyes had to convey the truth of his intentions. Leela stepped forward. Her presence was calm but undeniable. "Father," she said, her voice clear and confident, "Rajan has been honest with us. He has explained what he remembers and I believe him. It was not planned. It was a moment beyond both our control." The chief's expression softened slightly, but his gaze remained steady. He turned toward the elders, who nodded in quiet agreement. Yet the tension in the air remained palpable. The warriors were still watching, still waiting, their silent judgment ready to fall at the slightest provocation. Rajan felt a bead of sweat run down his temple, but he refused to show fear. He had to remain calm, dignified, and respectful, no matter how difficult it felt. The chief took a deep breath, then spoke again. "In this village, honor and trust are everything. Mistakes can be forgiven, but only if they are followed by honesty and courage. Rajan, if you truly mean what you say, you must prove it, not just to me, but to everyone here. The warriors, the elders, the villagers, they all must see your intentions." Rajan nodded, understanding immediately that words alone were not enough. He had to demonstrate his character through action. "I will do whatever is required, Chief," he said, his voice steady. "I want to earn your trust and the trust of your people. I will not shy away from any test you give me." The chief's eyes flicked toward the warriors. "Very well," he said. "Then you shall face a challenge that will show whether your heart is true. You will act with courage, wisdom, and respect. Only then can you prove your worth." Rajan felt a mixture of relief and anxiety. Relief that the chief had given him a chance, but anxiety because he did not yet know what the challenge would entail. He turned to Leela, who gave him a small, reassuring smile. She seemed confident that he could handle whatever lay ahead. Rajan drew in a deep breath, centering himself. This was the test that would determine his future, and he was determined not to fail. The chief gestured toward the center of the village square. A series of tasks had been prepared, each designed to test not only physical strength but also intelligence, patience, and moral judgment. Villagers and warriors alike watched as Rajan approached the first challenge, a puzzle involving the placement of ceremonial items in a precise order. Each item had significance, representing aspects of village life and tradition. A mistake could offend the elders or show a lack of understanding of the customs. Rajan studied the items carefully. He remembered what Leela had told him about their meanings and considered the sequence logically. With careful hands, he arranged each object, explaining his reasoning aloud to the chief and the observing crowd. The elders nodded in approval, and the warriors exchanged glances, their silent judgment shifting slightly in his favor. Rajan felt a small surge of confidence. Perhaps he could do this. Perhaps he could earn their trust. The next task was more physical. Rajan had to demonstrate his courage by climbing a tall wooden structure, representing the strength and resilience needed to protect the village. The warriors watched intently as he ascended, gripping the beams with care and determination. The crowd murmured in anticipation, but Rajan focused on his task, steadying his breath and moving with precision. When he reached the top, he looked down at the assembly below, meeting the chief's eyes with a respectful nod. The chief inclined his head slightly, acknowledging Rajan's effort. The final test was the most personal. Rajan was asked to speak about his intentions for the future, not just for himself, but for Leela, for the village, and for the bonds of trust that connected them all. He took a deep breath, feeling the eyes of the warriors, villagers, and elders upon him. "I know that I am an outsider," he said, "and that I have entered this village unexpectedly. But I have learned that honor, respect, and courage are more important than wealth or status. I want to prove that I can live by these values, protect the people I care for, and respect the traditions that make this village strong." A silence followed his words. The chief studied him for a long moment, then nodded. The elders whispered among themselves, their expressions thoughtful but approving. The warriors shifted slightly, their earlier sternness softening as they saw the truth in Rajan's words and actions. Leela stepped forward, her eyes meeting Rajan's. "Father," she said softly, "he has shown courage, wisdom, and respect. I believe he is worthy." The chief looked at his daughter, then at Rajan, then finally at the warriors. "Very well," he said, his voice carrying authority and finality. "You have proven yourself, Rajan. You have earned the trust of this village and the respect of its people. From this moment forward, you are accepted, but remember, trust is not given lightly, and honor must always be maintained." Rajan bowed deeply, gratitude and relief washing over him. The tension that had gripped him all morning began to ease, replaced by a cautious optimism. The warriors relaxed their stance slightly, acknowledging his success without words. The villagers murmured quietly, some smiling in approval, others shaking their heads in disbelief at the unexpected turn of events. As the chief turned and walked toward the ceremonial platform, Rajan felt a hand on his shoulder. It was Leela, her presence steady and reassuring. "You did well," she whispered. "Now we face the rest of the day together." Rajan nodded, understanding that this morning had been a test, not just of skill, but of character, patience, and respect. He realized that the challenge had been more than a personal trial. It had been a lesson in how to navigate a world where tradition, honor and courage mattered above all else. And as he followed Leela toward the platform, he felt a new sense of purpose. Whatever lay ahead in the wedding and beyond, he would face it with honesty, courage, and respect, values that had carried him through the most difficult moment of his life so far. The morning had passed, and the village was now fully awake and alive. The sounds of celebration had begun to fill the air. The laughter of children, the chatter of villagers, the steady rhythm of drums marking the passage of time, and the soft melodies of flutes floating through the sunlit paths. Yet for Rajan, there was no time to relax. The chief's words had been clear. Earning trust and respect required more than honesty. It required courage, wisdom, and strength of character. And now, the true test of his heart was about to begin. Rajan stood quietly at the edge of the ceremonial platform, watching as the villagers and warriors prepared for the next part of the day. Leela was beside him, calm and composed, a reassuring presence in the midst of the rising tension. She had already proven herself capable of handling the scrutiny of the warriors and elders, and now her quiet confidence encouraged Rajan to focus. The first part of the test had been completed, but the chief had made it clear that this was only the beginning. The chief stepped forward, his tall frame commanding attention. "Rajan," he said, his voice carrying across the square, "you have shown courage in thought and action, but courage alone does not define a person. A true member of this village must also demonstrate wisdom, fairness, and respect for the people and traditions that make us strong. You will face challenges today that will show whether your heart is worthy." Rajan took a deep breath, trying to steady his racing thoughts. He had survived the first test, but now the challenges would go deeper, testing not only his skills but also his intentions. He realized that the villagers were not merely watching for entertainment. They were watching to understand who he truly was, whether he could live by their values, and whether he could honor the trust being offered to him. The first challenge of this new phase was a test of judgment and wisdom. The chief gestured toward a group of villagers who were gathered around a large field. Several disputes had arisen among them, simple disagreements over land, resources, or responsibilities. Each conflict seemed minor at first glance, but they carried deeper meanings, representing the delicate balance of harmony in the village. Rajan was asked to mediate, to listen carefully, and to offer solutions that would satisfy everyone while respecting the traditions of the community. Rajan approached the first group cautiously. An elderly man and a younger farmer were arguing over a patch of land. The elderly man claimed it was his by right of ancestry, while the farmer argued that he had worked it for years and nurtured it with care. Rajan listened patiently, acknowledging both sides without judgment. He considered their words carefully, thinking not only of fairness but also of respect for the village's customs. Finally, he proposed a solution. The farmer could continue to work the land, but a portion of the harvest would be shared with the elder as a gesture of respect and acknowledgement of his heritage. The chief and the elders watched intently. The villagers murmured in surprise, then nods of approval spread through the crowd. The warrior's eyes softened slightly, and Rajan felt a surge of relief. His words had shown not only wisdom but also respect for the traditions that guided the village. Yet he knew this was only the first of several tests, and he could not afford to let his guard down. Next came a test of courage. The chief directed him toward the forest that bordered the village. Hidden among the trees were obstacles and challenges designed to test physical bravery and quick thinking. Rajan had to retrieve a ceremonial item that symbolized strength and honor, but the path was not easy. Sharp branches, uneven ground, and hidden pits demanded careful navigation. The villagers and warriors followed at a distance, observing every move. Rajan moved cautiously but with determination. He remembered Leela's advice: stay focused, respect your surroundings, and trust in your own abilities. Step by step, he maneuvered through the obstacles, never rushing, never panicking. When he finally reached the ceremonial item, a small, intricately carved box, he lifted it carefully and began the return journey. The path back was no easier. He had to maintain balance, avoid hazards, and ensure the box remained intact. Each step was a test not only of courage but also of patience and responsibility. When he returned to the village square, the chief nodded approvingly. The warriors relaxed slightly, their disciplined posture softening as they recognized Rajan's determination and careful actions. The villagers whispered among themselves, many impressed by the young man's ability to navigate the challenge with grace and skill. Rajan felt a sense of accomplishment, but he knew the most important part of the test was yet to come. The final challenge was the most personal and the most revealing. Rajan was asked to demonstrate his intentions toward Leela, not through words alone, but through actions that reflected respect, empathy, and commitment. The chief explained that this was not about love in the simple sense. It was about showing that Rajan could honor her choices, support her, and act with integrity even in difficult circumstances. Rajan took a moment to gather his thoughts. He turned to Leela, whose calm gaze met his. He felt a mixture of nervousness and determination. The challenge was not just for the approval of the chief or the villagers. It was a test of his own character, a moment to prove to himself that he could rise to the expectations placed upon him. The chief presented a scenario, a series of tasks that required cooperation, compassion, and thoughtful action. Rajan was asked to help organize a ceremony for the children of the village, ensuring that every child received attention and care. He also had to resolve a misunderstanding between two villagers without causing embarrassment or offense. Each task seemed small individually, but together they tested his ability to act with patience, empathy, and respect. Rajan approached each task methodically. He listened carefully to the children, making them feel heard and valued. He guided them gently through the ceremony, praising their efforts and encouraging teamwork. When he encountered the misunderstanding between villagers, he spoke calmly and thoughtfully, considering the feelings of everyone involved. His words were honest, respectful, and fair, earning nods of approval from both parties. The chief watched silently, then the elders and warriors observed in quiet admiration. Rajan's actions demonstrated not only respect for Leela, but also for the community as a whole. He had shown that his intentions were genuine, that he understood the responsibilities of being part of the village, and that he was capable of acting with wisdom and integrity even under scrutiny. Leela approached him afterward, her eyes bright with pride. "You have done well," she said softly. "You have shown courage, wisdom, and respect. Not everyone could have passed these tests, but you have." Rajan felt a wave of relief and pride. He realized that this journey was not just about winning the approval of the chief or the villagers. It was about understanding what it meant to act with honor, to respect traditions, and to value the people around him. The challenges had tested him in ways he had never expected, and he had emerged stronger, more confident, and more aware of his own capacity for growth. The warriors, who had been observing silently throughout the day, began to show subtle signs of respect. A few nodded in acknowledgement, others relaxed their stance, and many whispered to one another, impressed by Rajan's courage and integrity. The villagers, too, began to smile, their previous tension giving way to admiration. The day, which had started with fear and uncertainty, was slowly transforming into a celebration of character, strength, and mutual respect. As the sun climbed higher, casting its warm light across the village, Rajan realized that he had learned more than he could have imagined. Courage, he understood, was not just about facing danger. It was about acting with honesty, integrity, and respect in every situation. Wisdom was not only knowing what to do, but understanding how to consider the feelings and traditions of others. And respect, above all, was about valuing people, their choices, and the community that supported them. Leela took his hand gently, guiding him back toward the center of the village. "The last part of the day will be easier now," she said with a small smile. "The warriors and the chief have seen your heart. The rest is just a matter of celebration." Rajan nodded, feeling a mix of relief and gratitude. He knew that the journey was far from over, but he also understood that the hardest part, the test of his character, had been completed. The villagers had witnessed his courage, wisdom, and respect, and in doing so, he had earned not only their approval but also a sense of belonging that he had never experienced before. As he walked beside Leela, the village seemed brighter, more welcoming. The children waved at him, the elders nodded, and even the warriors offered subtle smiles of acknowledgement. Rajan realized that this acceptance was not given lightly. It had been earned through action, patience, and integrity. And as the preparations for the wedding reached their final stages, he felt ready to face whatever challenges or celebrations the day might bring, confident that he had proven himself worthy of the trust placed in him. The first rays of dawn broke over the horizon, spilling golden light across the village. The air was cool, filled with the soft sounds of birds and the gentle rustling of leaves. For most of the villagers, it was just another beautiful morning, but for Rajan, it was the culmination of everything he had experienced over the past day. Every challenge, every test, every moment of uncertainty had led to this point, the final acceptance and celebration of the wedding. Rajan stood beside Leela, watching the village come alive with anticipation. The platform was now fully decorated, the garlands of flowers glistening in the sunlight, and the ceremonial items carefully arranged in their proper places. The villagers moved with a sense of rhythm and purpose, each person contributing to the unfolding celebration. Children ran ahead, carrying small bowls of petals to scatter along the pathway, their laughter adding a lightness to the solemnity of the occasion. The 321 warriors, once so imposing and stern, now stood with a quiet respect. Their spears and shields gleamed in the morning light, and their eyes, once sharp with scrutiny, now held a calm acknowledgement. Rajan felt a sense of relief wash over him. The tests of courage, wisdom, and respect had not only proven his character, but had also earned him the recognition of the entire village. The warrior's approval was subtle but unmistakable, a silent signal that he was now accepted among them. The chief appeared at the center of the village square, his presence commanding yet gentle. He wore his ceremonial garments with pride, his expression a mix of solemnity and satisfaction. The villagers fell silent as he raised his hand, signaling the start of the final ritual. Rajan felt a flutter of nerves, but this time it was different. He was no longer facing judgment. He was part of the celebration, an honored participant in a ceremony that had begun long before he arrived. "Today," the chief began, his voice carrying across the square, "we celebrate not only the union of two individuals, but also the strength of our community. Each member of this village plays a role, and each tradition we honor binds us together. Rajan, you have shown courage, wisdom, and respect. You have earned your place among us, and you have shown that you understand the values that guide our lives." Rajan bowed his head respectfully. He felt a mixture of humility and pride. The chief's words were more than approval. They were a recognition of his journey, of the effort he had made to prove himself worthy. Leela placed her hand lightly on his arm, a reassuring touch that reminded him that they had faced these challenges together. The chief gestured toward the warriors. "Today, these brave men who protect and uphold the honor of this village will witness and affirm this union. Their presence is a symbol of strength, trust, and unity. Rajan, step forward and let the warriors see your heart once more." Rajan moved forward with deliberate steps. He felt the eyes of the 321 warriors upon him, but this time their gaze was not filled with suspicion or judgment. Instead, it was an acknowledgement of his journey, a recognition of the respect, courage, and honesty he had demonstrated. Each step he took was steady, confident, and filled with the knowledge that he had earned this moment through action and integrity. Leela walked beside him, her presence a constant source of support. Together they approached the ceremonial platform, where the chief and the elders waited. The villagers gathered around, forming a circle of warmth and celebration. Rajan felt a sense of belonging he had never known before, a feeling that the community had accepted him not just as an outsider but as someone worthy of trust, honor, and friendship. The chief spoke again, addressing the entire village. Let this day be remembered not only for the joining of two lives but also for the lessons we have learned. Courage is not just facing danger, it is acting with honesty and integrity. Wisdom is not just knowledge, it is understanding and respect for others. And respect is the foundation upon which our community stands. Rajan has demonstrated these values, and today we honor him as one who belongs among us. The villagers responded with applause and soft cheers, their faces bright with smiles. Children ran forward to scatter petals along the pathway, their laughter echoing across the square. The warriors stood at attention, then slowly lowered their weapons in a gesture of acknowledgement and approval. Rajan felt a surge of relief and joy. The tension and uncertainty that had gripped him since waking in the hut had finally lifted, replaced by a sense of acceptance and hope. The ceremony began with traditional songs and dances, each movement carefully performed to honor the customs of the village. Rajan and Leela participated with grace, guided by the elders and the chief. The rhythm of the drums, the melody of the flutes, and the harmonious voices of the villagers created an atmosphere of unity and celebration. Rajan felt a deep sense of connection to everyone around him. He realized that this was more than a wedding. It was a reaffirmation of the bonds that held the village together, a celebration of community, tradition, and shared values. As the rituals continued, Rajan reflected on the journey that had brought him here. The panic of waking next to Leela, the fear of judgment, the tests of courage and wisdom, and the challenges that required patience and empathy, all of it had led to this moment of acceptance. He understood now that true honor was earned through consistent action, through honesty and respect, and through the willingness to face difficult situations with integrity. Leela's eyes met his during a quiet moment in the ceremony. She smiled, a gentle expression filled with warmth and pride. Rajan felt a wave of gratitude. He had not only gained the approval of the chief and the villagers, but also the trust and partnership of Leela. Together, they had navigated uncertainty and fear, and now they stood at the center of a celebration that honored both tradition and personal courage. The chief raised his hands, signaling the final part of the ceremony. Rajan and Leela stepped forward, standing side by side on the platform. The elders placed garlands around their necks, symbolizing unity, respect, and mutual commitment. The villagers cheered, and the warriors nodded in approval, their faces showing pride and acknowledgement. Rajan felt a sense of completeness, as though the journey of the past day had culminated in this single, meaningful moment. The celebration continued with feasting, laughter, and music. Tables were filled with food prepared by the villagers, from steaming rice and savory dishes to sweet treats and fresh fruits. Children played and ran between the tables, their joy infectious. The warriors, once distant and intimidating, now mingled with the villagers, sharing stories, offering blessings, and joining in the festivities. Rajan realized that the village had transformed from a place of scrutiny and fear into a community of warmth, acceptance, and joy. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, casting its golden light across the village, Rajan felt a profound sense of belonging. He had arrived as an outsider, unknowing and uncertain, and now he was embraced as part of the community. The lessons of courage, wisdom, and respect had been tested and proven, not just through words but through actions. Rajan understood that these values were the foundation of every strong community, and that living by them required effort, patience, and integrity. Leela took his hand again, guiding him through the crowd. Villagers smiled and nodded, acknowledging him as one of their own. The warriors offered their final gestures of respect, a silent affirmation that Rajan had earned his place. The chief approached, placing a hand on Rajan's shoulder. "You have done well," he said, his voice steady and kind. "Remember these lessons and you will always find a home here." Rajan bowed deeply, feeling a sense of gratitude and humility. He knew that the journey was not over, that life would continue to test him. But he also knew that he had the strength, guidance, and support to face whatever came next. The village, the warriors, the elders, and Leela had all witnessed his character and intentions, and he had emerged stronger, wiser, and more confident. As the celebrations continued, Rajan looked around at the smiling faces, the bright decorations, and the vibrant energy of the village. He realized that this day would be remembered not only as the wedding of Leela and himself, but also as a day when courage, wisdom, and respect had triumphed over fear and uncertainty. The story of the morning, waking in the hut facing judgment, completing the challenges, would become a memory that reminded him of the importance of integrity, honesty, and respect for tradition. The villagers sang and danced well into the morning, and Rajan found himself swept up in the joyous energy. The challenges of the past day, though difficult, had prepared him to embrace this moment fully. He laughed with Leela, shared stories with the elders, and joined in the dances, feeling a sense of unity and belonging that he had never experienced before. As the sun reached its peak, Rajan paused for a moment of reflection. He realized that the journey had been about more than just surviving the morning or earning acceptance. It had been about understanding the values that made the village strong, the lessons that guided life, and the power of courage, wisdom, and respect. He knew that these lessons would stay with him forever, shaping the way he lived, the decisions he made, and the relationships he nurtured. And as the villagers celebrated, the warriors stood in quiet pride, and Leela smiled beside him. Rajan felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The dawn that had begun with fear and uncertainty had transformed into a morning of acceptance, unity, and hope. Together, he and Leela had navigated the challenges, honored the traditions, and embraced the community. And in that moment, Rajan knew that he had found not only love and respect, but also a true home.